Greetings. If it's possible for someone to let me know if we can be seen and heard, that would be awesome. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Today we'll be studying this book of Song of Songs, the Megillah, and so it's very exciting to be thinking about how we might read this book, this Song of All Songs, during this time, not only of Pesach, but of the pandemic. And so for those of you who are able to, I have allowed for a screen share looking at the book of the Song of Songs, and hopefully that will be helpful as we move through the text, which will be beginning shortly. Greetings, everyone. We'll begin in just 1 minute. Hopefully you can see the screen, both with the Song of Songs and can see who's listening this way. We're also streaming live at Jewish Facebook Live. Greetings, friends, and good morning. Welcome to those of you who are on Zoom. Welcome to those of you who are watching by Jewish Facebook Live on the site jewishLIVE. It's a wonderful site with lots of things happening throughout this this time and beyond. Part of exactly that is what we're going to be discussing today, is the ways in which the book of the Song of Songs, the Megillah, which is the scroll of the Song of Songs, which is traditionally read during Passover, and we'll talk about when and who and where and why. This is an incredible opportunity, but we'll also be talking about the deep messages that both the rabbis, the ancient rabbis and contemporary scholars see in the possibilities of what it means to read the Song of Songs today. But as we do every time we gather here in these sessions, we begin with a bracha, a blessing for the study of Torah. Feel free to join me wherever you are. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has sanctified us, who has helped keep us focused on that which is holy and enables us to study and has commanded us to study Torah. And I'll add to that that this is one of the most incredible things about Torah for the Jewish people and sacred texts for all people, is that no matter our circumstances and no matter our situation and no matter where we are or who we have the capacity to recite and remember and also to read and to chant those texts that are sacred to us. And here's a text which Today we're going to focus on its messages. The title of this session is The 5 Yearnings of the Song of Songs, of the Shir HaShirim. And we're going to be talking about what those yearnings are and how they might speak to us today. So first, a couple of just immediate questions that emerge about this ancient text is that there was a great debate in the among the rabbis about whether or not this book should be included among in the sacred canon. And one of the things that we learned is that in this debate, it was very much a concern because of its, well, it has some very erotic and very, very bodily terminology about sexuality and yearning. And so the rabbis were actually concerned about whether or not this book should be included in the canon. And one of the things that we see in a later Masechet of the Talmud, Masechet Sofrim, is that they argued about it, but they ultimately agreed that it should be included. And the question, of course, is when should it be read? Okay, it should be included, by the way, one of the ways in which, and we'll see this play out in our conversation, one of the ways in which they understood that it should be, the reason it should be included is precisely because that erotic, deep expression of love and passion could be and should be reinterpreted to be talking about the relationship between the people of Israel and God, and the yearning for God. And we'll come back to that interpretation in a moment. So the first question is, when do we read this book? And one of the main traditional ways, at least in the Ashkenazi Jewish world, that it was understood that it should be read is on Chol HaMoed Pesach, during the intermediate, actually Shabbat Chol HaMoed Pesach, during the intermediate days of Passover. And that, of course, that Shabbat is the Saturday that just passed. There are other traditions that have it read on the 5th and 6th night of Passover. And there are other traditions that actually argue that it could be read and it should be read on the first night of Passover. So look at the possibilities: the first night of Passover, the Sabbath, the Shabbat of Passover, or toward the end, the 5th and 6th nights of Passover. In other words, at some point during Passover, all of the major traditions agree that it should and must be read. And if you think about it, this Song of Songs is being read alongside the telling of the other great song of the Bible, which is the Song of the Sea. The Song of the Sea is that which is attributed to the Israelites as they actually realized that they had crossed the sea, crossed the Reed Sea, and were attaining freedom. So that is another huge aspect of how we understand this song, is that it is a song, it is an ultimate song of love at a time when the ultimate redemption is happening. So putting those two things together also helped the ancient sages determine that this is a book that should be read at a time of redemption and love. Some scholars say it is kind of like the ketubah of the Jewish people, the marriage contract and document for the Jewish people, because it is an expression of deep, deep love. And what greater love have we ever experienced as a people than God hearing us and redeeming us and taking us out from Egypt, as we just read in the Haggadah with Yad Chazakah and Zruah Nituyah. So we have all the ways in which this book should be read at this time of year as a deep expression of the love that our people have experienced. So we have the 3 occasions during Passover when it might be read. And then we have the question of who should read this book, in what context should this book be read. And this has actually been a source of some great halachic debate this year, because some authorities believe that it's a book that should only be read aloud. It should only be read in community as part of a minyan, as part of the Megillah, the scroll that's read in shul, or certainly in a minyan. So if that's the case, then should one read it this year? These halachic questions emerged because, first of all, we don't have the possibility, and we shouldn't have the possibility of gathering together this way as a minyan in this time. because of the pandemic and the quarantine. So we don't have the possibility of reading it in community. So should we still be reading it as individuals? And to that, there are halachic authorities that have argued that we shouldn't be reading it as individuals. You can see this book from its inception till today is considered somewhat dangerous, right? So should or shouldn't it be read this year as individuals, either last Shabbat or at your Seder, or these are the three possibilities of when, over Shabbat, at your Seder, or in these upcoming nights, 5th and 6th nights of Pesach, which are now, right, coming upon us. So one halachic decision was it shouldn't be read. Another halachic decision that we have from Rabbi Herschel Schachter is the idea that it actually, the question of whether or not it should be read is primarily about whether or not it meets the mood of this time. Maybe it dafka precisely should not be read when we're in this situation, because this is not something that actually meets the mood of the situation that we're in. We're actually in a, sorry about that, we are actually in a time of great sorrow and sacrifice. And so we wonder if this should be a situation in which we should be reading it. Perhaps we shouldn't be reading it. And of course, the other possibility is that we should be reading it. The other halachic possibility is we should be reading it, but we should know that we are not fulfilling the obligation. We're not fulfilling the obligation of reading it to fulfill the minhag. So there's not a halachic requirement, but are we reading it, and are we, if we read it alone, are we fulfilling that minhag? And his answer is no, but there's nothing to prohibit us from reading it as individuals, okay? This is all to get to those points of whether or not we should be reading it at this time. So we get to the conclusion, perhaps the very important conclusion in this case, that we should be reading it. We can read it, rather. We can read it even in our isolation, even though we are very much alone. Some of us are completely alone, but we're not fulfilling a minhag. The other argument, the argument that I want to make, is that we should and must be reading it now. It is precisely the kind of message and the kind of offering of yearnings, descriptive yearnings, of the kinds of yearnings that we're all experiencing now on multiple levels, that are precisely important for this hour. For this hour of pandemic, this is the book we should be reading in this season. Not only because, of course, seasonally we should add, it's the argument for reading it now, is it's also a wonderful expression of the rebirth of love, and certainly the rebirth of the natural world, and the rebirth of the world in springtime, a mating season, a birthing season. We see around us that even though in this pandemic time, that our trees are blooming. There are tons and tons of trees blooming with their flowers. Earth, nature is continuing to take its course, even though we human beings have taken a major step back. So I want to frame this as an offering to read the book with multiple lenses simultaneously. There are multiple lenses that we can bring to this simultaneously. And the question are, what are those lenses? How should we read it? And what are the 5 yearnings? So I'm suggesting that it is certainly, and many scholars have suggested this, that it is certainly a book about relationships and the evolution of relationships on multiple levels. There's both the physical, the emotional level of the relationship for the human being, and we see that develop in multiple ways during the chapters of the Song of Songs that we'll see in just a moment. But we also see that it can, and I think also should be read on a spiritual level, a communal level, about how we as a people, whether alone or in community, are yearning not only for community. Many of us have lost kind of the major structures that we find ourselves in every single day, not only our workplaces, but our synagogues, our minyans, coffee shops, right? All those places where we go out and are part of the world, right? Either quietly or loudly, either as you know, one of a minyan or one of hundreds of people. We are yearning for that human aspect of community. Each of us in different ways, but certainly the Seder was an incredible expression of how we need and desire community. So we're reading it both as individuals and as collectives. We're reading it both physically, in a physicality of physical, sexual, personal yearning, and we're also reading it collectively at the same time. So those are the multiple lenses that we are bringing to the book. And of course, all of this is very profound because it's all based on one of the reasons I'm focusing this way is because it's based on an idea of in the Song of Songs, we'll see it, the lovers only get a glimpse of each other through a window or through a lattice, right? So there's this sense that all of us are actually seeing each other through some kind of screen, right? Through these Zoom screens, through our computer screens, through our telephone screens, and we can't touch each other, right? We can't, I can't reach out and hug or hold my mother's hand, right? She's in quarantine in the same city, but I can't reach her, right? And how much the more so for people who are far away from their loved ones of all generations and from people they care about and from people they're concerned about. We are yearning, but yet we're reaching, and the best we can do is reach through windows of various kinds. So what are the 5 kinds of yearnings that I'm going to suggest we're looking at here in the Song of Songs? The yearnings that I want to suggest are, 1, it's a yearning, hopefully you can see the screen again now, the Shir HaShirim Asher LeShlomo. Give me the kisses of your mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine, right? Even just by the second verse, we have this deep, deep desire to feel the physical kiss of the beloved. So that's the first kind of yearning. The second kind we already spoke about a bit, which is the yearning for God. And even though these relationships, both between the lovers and with God, are very complex throughout the book and in our experience of them, we're yearning for some kind of fulfillment of those loves. The third kind of yearning we spoke about is the yearning for community. The fourth kind of yearning that I'm arguing about is a yearning for a wholeness of the self or of the body of Israel, the collective Israel. There's something that is very broken. We have the main protagonist lover, the female lover, who feels an enormous sense of being judged and being broken and being ugly and not being necessarily desirable. And so there's this yearning for a kind of greater self-love, a wholeness, a desire to actually be seen as beautiful and to be accepted. So that's both of the lover and of Israel, right? A sense that certainly as slaves, a sense of brokenness and not knowing how to navigate the relationship or even find God, and of the lover, right? Simultaneously, we're reading with both these lenses. So there's desire for the wholeness of the self, of the body of Israel. And fifth, and this is perhaps the most painful, is I think this is a very powerful yearning for those we've lost. At least as powerful as the other 4 kinds of yearning is the yearning for those we've lost. Many of us are in a year of mourning for those we've actually lost. Personally, I lost my father and my father-in-law, but in this time of pandemic, we're also yearning for those who are sick and taken far away from us into isolation. But we're also yearning for those who have died. A dear friend of mine to whose memory I dedicate this session, Erwin Feldman, a peer. He was actually the groom of the first couple I ever officiated at their wedding, the first couple I married. The groom, Erwin Feldman, fell to this horrible virus just over a week ago on the Shabbat before Pesach. And so we dedicate this to his memory, but also it is brought even more into clarity for many of us who've lost loved ones and for many throughout the world who are losing loved ones by the tens of thousands, that we yearn for those we've lost. And that interpretation, that yearning also comes through scholars who believe that King Solomon didn't write this at a time when he was youthful and falling in love and about to get married, but actually he wrote this toward the end of his life as a retrospective on love and how we experience it. And so we'll see toward the end of the book how he argues that love is even more powerful than death. And so those are the 5 kinds of yearning that we'll be tracing through the book. The yearning for the beloved, 1, the yearning for God, 2, the yearning for community, 3, the yearning for a wholeness of self, 4, and the yearning for those that we have lost, 5. So let's dive in and look at the book and see where we see these different yearnings throughout the text. As we see here, the first chapter, right, fills us with this sense of the desire for those that we've lost, and for the desire for those. In the case of chapter 1, we're focusing on this desire for the beloved. So it's, draw me after you, we have in the text. Let's see if I can just move us along through the text in an easier way. Hopefully you see the text moving on your screen. So we see this, this physical desire. We've got kisses, we've got, the sound of your name even. It's your ointments, right? All of the things about you, right? Are filled with create desire, but there's something that is keeping us apart. In this case, it's this king. The king can keep us apart. There are foxes in our orchards that can keep us apart. But here we have the idea that the king has brought us to the chambers. Let us delight and rejoice in your love, savoring it more than wine. Is this the king? Is this the beloved? And then we have what we're talking about as the 4th yearning here. The protagonist here doesn't feel beautiful, right? She's dark, she's comely, she feels like she won't be appreciated. So she says, don't stare at me I'm in the first chapter of the Song of Songs, verse 6, right? Don't stare at me because I'm dark skinned. Don't belittle me because I've actually been forced to be outside. I've been actually traumatized as a daughter by my brothers. My mother's sons, right, have forced me into a labor outside. And I wasn't able to only do what I was asked to do for them. I wasn't able to take care of myself. So there's a deep yearning already in chapter 1 for her to be able to take care of Karmi, Shali, right? I wasn't able to take care of my own vineyard. But I'm desiring to be near someone else, right? And then we have the voice of the lover, right, saying, I do not know you, right? I do not see you. And yet we're moving through this way of moving back and forth between the voices of the characters of the book, where we see that there's this constant physical description, right, where they're actually jewels and there's gold, and it's as though we're on the couch of a king with fragrance, and we have this sense of fragrance of myrrh between my breasts, right? So of the books of the Bible that have been made sacred, this is the most graphic in terms of the physical body. We've got tons of graphic images of breasts and other parts of the body, and a sense of sensuality and smell and touch and taste, and of course the physical view of how we see people. So we're looking through in the chapters to see how the different yearnings are expressed. So we have the physical yearning and also the personal yearning for fulfillment expressed there. Ani chavatzelet hasharon is how chapter 2 begins. I am a rose of the Sharon, of the Sharon area of the land of Israel, right? Shoshanat Amakim, a lily of the valleys. And like a lily among the thorns, so is my darling, Rayati, Ben Habanot. So the male voice is looking for this lily among the thorns. So there's also a sense of yearning for a beloved, that there is nobody who can take that person's place. Those who we love and have loved, there's no replacing them. There is a particular lily that is our beloved. And of course, Ketapuach Be'atzei Hayar. And as I read these, of course, we know that these phrases are taken by poets since the emergence of this book in the ancient world. Poets and songwriters have played upon these verses over and over again. They appear not only in our wedding liturgy and in our Passover liturgy, but they appear throughout secular and religious poetry as expressions of a deep love for the beloved of our youth. And of course, all kinds of metaphors are present here in terms of fruit and parts of the body and marble and the legs, and how we can understand the physicality and the embrace of the lover. One of the verses about which I've written in the past is this verse 6 of chapter 2. Smolo tachat leroshi veyemino techabkeni. His left hand was under my head and his right arm embraced me. So there's this sense of total embrace and total acceptance and total safety, and a sense of being held by the loved one. And yet there's this sense that although we yearn, perhaps this isn't the right time for fulfillment of that love. Is there a time and a place where all of these loves, all of these yearnings need to be fulfilled? And so the authors here of these love letters have the character constantly saying, but wait, it's not time. I'm not ready. This isn't the time. This isn't the place. We shouldn't stir up love until it please. And this is also a powerful statement about all of these yearnings, all of these kinds of relationships. When do we stir them up? When do we reach out? When do we engage with the significant others? And what does it mean to be waiting for the right time? And this has actually, I think, been a very powerful verse that I've been thinking about a lot this Pesach, which is, of course, one of the deep theological problems of the Haggadah and of the story of redemption. We both, learn this in some of the works about the Haggadah theologically, including the new book by Vanessa Oakes. I think about this when I watched Prince of Egypt with my children. But of course, whenever we read this story, you want to cry out to God saying, well, we're glad you heard our cry, but where were you all those hundreds of years beforehand? Where have you been? Why have you been hiding your face in any time of suffering? We want to know, where is God and why is God hiding God's face? And yet there's this sense of, there was a particular Moshe Rabbeinu, there was a particular time when we can be liberated and a time when we're suffering, and the human limitations of understanding that. And of course, the human cry, the theodicy of saying there's no reason why someone suffering must wait for redemption. There's no reason why someone suffering should wait for healing. Where are you, God? And yet here we have even the lover saying, wait, he comes, but we're not ready, right? Do not, she's saying to the Benot Yerushalayim, right? This chorus of critique that accompanies us through the book. Do not wake up love until it please. But look, he's coming over the mountains, bounding over the hills, right? And then we have some of these powerful, beautiful verses of 9 and 10, which is, this is what he looks like. He looks like Litzvi or Ofer, he looks like a gazelle or a young stag. My husband's name is Ofer, right? There he stands behind, there's something about the yearning, he's behind a wall. And here's this gaze that I wanted to focus on as well. Min ha-chalonot metzitz, min ha-chadarkim. I can almost see him. We can almost reach each other, right? But he's behind a wall. He's behind a mechitza of some kind, behind a window. Mina chalonot mitzitz. He's looking, he's peering at me from behind a window from far away. And there's some kind of lattice, something that's separating us. But we can hear his voice, right? Kumi lach rayati yafati ulechilach. Some of the powerful words that are repeated in so many songs and poems, right? Just come away with me. And the call is also a powerful call of yearning, of seasonal yearning. Kinei hastav avar, hageshem halach lo. For lo, the winter, for now the winter is past, right? So we clearly know we're in springtime. The rains are over and gone. Hanitzanim niru ba'aretz. There's a rebirth of spring. Blossoms have appeared in the land. This is a very common Passover song, certainly in the land of Israel and everywhere. Eit hazamir, the time of the pruning, and the song of the turtle dove is heard in our land, right? Eit zamir higia vekol hator nishma. So we see this rebirth in the land. Isn't this the time? Isn't this the time when the blossoms appear? And then there's a continuing description of that situation, and we smell it, we feel it. Come, kumi lechi lach rayati yafati ulechi lach. Come and go away with me. And then we have the beautiful description of nature, of the body of the female, and yet there is something that we must face, which is there are these foxes. There are these little foxes that ruin the vineyards, right? There's something, and I even dare compare this to a virus that is ruining our springtime. It is ruining our vineyards that we're meant to protect. It is ruining that which we need to take care of. And yet there's this chorus, but I know who I love. Dodi li v'ani lo, right? I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. So I know that my beloved is here. Swift as a gazelle again, right? The tzvi or the ofer, the repetition of the sense of the powerful, fast-moving lover. And I know that they are out there. And then we have in chapter 3, the move to a sense that all of this is but a dream, right? That there's all kinds of things that are happening. And it is though the protagonist, the female character, lover here, of course, this is very binary in terms of gender. And there are lots of other ways of reading the book, but I'm following some of the main rabbinic interpretations and of how this book has been read through the ages. And of course, we're reading it in parallel as our desire for our beloved and our desire for God. But in chapter 3, it becomes as though it's not just that our lover is away on the other side of a wall, and there are these windows separating us, right? Which is really the theme of our time. But I keep looking for him. I keep looking, we keep looking for God, we keep looking for the beloved, we keep trying to find community, we keep trying to feel close to those we've lost. We keep looking for a sense of wholeness, and yet there's this theme recurring in the book. And this is why I think it's so powerful that we precisely, Dafka should be reading it now, that there's this, what keeps the book moving forward is this desire through all of those yearnings to keep searching and seeking, right? The one et she'ahava nafshi, right? Avaksha et she'ahava nafshi. in verse 2 of chapter 3. So chapter 3, verse 2 has this powerful verse, which is also often quoted in the context of weddings and love songs. There's the one that my soul loves. And this is also Israel calling out to God, no, we cannot serve other gods. There's the God that we are meant to serve. There's the God that we are meant to be together with and to be able to be a free people to serve. So there's this spiritual yearning as well. There are those who are keeping us apart. A repetition that maybe it's not time yet, right? All of these senses of repetition. And there's this sense that it's actually kind of terrifying at times. And what I'm doing is I'm moving us forward to verse 4, where again, the lover tells the female protagonist how beautiful she is, right? So there's almost a coming together of an affirmation of that self-doubt that we spoke about, a yearning for being appreciated. But we have this hugely physical, sensual description of the female character, right? Even behind, right, her veil. Her eyes are like doves behind your veil. Chapter 4, verse 1, your hair is a flock of goats streaming down Mount Gilad. So are we talking about a woman here? Or are we talking about the land of Israel? Are we talking about two lovers, or are we talking about God and the people of Israel, right? These possibilities, I'm saying it's not one or the other, it's all of the above. And it's not one of our 5 yearnings that we need to choose. It's all of these 5 yearnings that we've been speaking about, right? The yearning for our loved one, our beloved, in a sensual, sexual lover sense. There's the search and the desire for God, for a spiritual fulfillment, even in a complex relationship. There's the third one, the desire and the yearning for community, especially in these times when many of us are so alone. The fourth one is there's a desire for our own wholeness. And the fifth one is this yearning and a desire for nearness with those we've lost, those who have gone through death to another place. Here's this hugely physical and landed description and nature-based description of the beloved. And every part of you is fair. There is no blemish in you. And of course, that is, we know this is a memory of and a description of the perfection of the loved one that we're seeking. A perfection, right? If distance, what's the phrase? If distance makes the heart grow fonder, distance also and time also brings nostalgia, right? That there was, and this is what the people of Israel feel about the Exodus. There was a time of a perfection. There was a time when our love was perfect. There was a time when nothing at all was wrong with our lover. There is no umum einbach. There is no blemish. And of course, we know through the eyes of lovers, there is a kind of sense of total beauty and perfection, right? Even in the uniqueness and the imperfection of who we are, there's a sense of the perfection. In verse 9, with one glance of your eyes, with one coil of your necklace, there's this sense that that she has captured his heart. Sweetness drops from your lips. We're now in verse 11. Sweetness drops from your lips. And one of the verses that I wanted to get to here in this chapter is Gan Na'ul Achoti Chala. You are like a locked garden, or you are being held in a garden locked away from me. You are a gal na'ul, you are a fountain locked, you are a sealed up spring, right? Ma'ayan chatum. All of these phrases are about this desire for a kind of physical fulfillment and a physical unification of the lovers, and yet the garden is locked. Of course, this has been interpreted in many ways throughout the generations of, everything from a chastity belt to, to how we understand the body without physical touch, physical sexual touch between bride and groom before they're married, all kinds of ways of understanding this concept of being a gan na'ul. But this idea of being locked away from is also, I think, what quarantine has been about for many, right? We are locked away sometimes in gardens, sometimes in hospital rooms, often in our own homes, but we are locked away in quarantine, literally in locked gardens, away from the world, away from all those who we love. And so that is a very powerful way of imagining and understanding the yearning of this book and the yearning of this hour, the yearnings of this hour. And why I think that it's not a question of can we or should we read this book this Passover, but actually it is an absolute clear necessity to have a book like this, to help us describe our yearnings and to help us remember what it is we're yearning for, and to cause in us this, this desire that she keeps seeking her lover is also a sign of hope. If you think that your fulfillment, your loved one, your God is just on the other side of a wall or just through a window, through a lattice, you can see them and almost feel and touch them, and you can even hear them, right? Like we are doing on screen so much now. That inspires an incredible, deep sense of hope. There is despair here, but what pushes the whole book forward is this great hope that some kind of fulfillment of our yearning is about to happen. There is about to be a fresh well here. There's about to be a garden that will be opened. And there is about to be a context in which we can see and feel our beloved and all of the smells and all of the sights and taste all of the fruits and the fresh water. We will soon be able to have our beloved come into our garden at the end of chapter 4. And actually in chapter 5, alas, there is, right? Bati legani achoti chala. I've come into my garden, right? I've picked all of these things that I need. I have had my wine, achalti, right? Shatiti, I have eaten, I have had to drink, we should drink. Ichlu re'im ushtu shichru. We should be able to drink and eat. And it's really a description almost of the bride and groom, right? Eating after the wedding. We should be able to drink deeply from love. And that is what we hope will happen to all of our desires. And yet, is this real or is this a dream? Verse 2, I was asleep, but my heart was wakeful. Ani yeshena libi er. Perhaps I was in a dream and I am asleep, my body is asleep, right? This quarantine actually feels like kind of a sleep on the world, but our hearts, libi er, our heart is awake. Our hearts are awake and searching for our beloved and feeling all of these yearnings and desires. And here comes a phrase which is very significant in this book because of the ways in which it's been interpreted. Kol dodi dofek, the voice of my beloved is knocking. And this becomes, in fact, a term that Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik takes as the title of an article, of a talk. Actually, originally it was a talk he gave on Yom Ha'atzmaut in 1956, and it becomes the title of an article and a chapter that's translated into multiple languages now. And one of the main things that he argues in this article entitled Kol Dodi Dofek, from chapter 5, verse 2 of Song of Songs, the Kol Dodi Dofek is the voice of my beloved is knocking. So we hear voice and there's something at our door, right? Almost among us, almost with us is this sense that our lover is right outside the door, right? Open the door, pitchu, pitchili, right? Open the door, open the door. And Soloveitchik, the Rav, uses this to explain the ways in which God is knocking on our door. There are these knocks and these callings and these opportunities. And the question is, are we awake enough to hear them? when God is knocking on our door, quite literally in this sense, in this experience, in the Song of Songs, when God is knocking on our door, are we awake enough to hear it? And so Soloveitchik takes us through in that essay a number of different kind of knocks that we should be hearing, the people of Israel should be hearing. And one of the main ones we should be hearing is that it's a call to a new relationship, to a new covenant. It's actually quite radical what Soloveitchik argues in that famous essay of Kol Dodi Dofek. His theologically radical argument is that there was a covenant of before and after the creation of a sovereign Jewish state. The covenant that we had with God before was what he calls a Brit Goral, or a covenant of fate. What happened to us and happened to us as a people is something that happened to us. And so we developed all kinds of ways of understanding how we should take care of each other. But we also had this sense that that we also need to be able to develop all the things that have happened in Judaism, the communal caretaking, tzedakah, all the ways we remember what's happened to us, but those are all actually responses. And what Soloveitchik says we have now is the opportunity to have a different kind of covenant, a covenant of destiny, a brit yi'ud, a covenant of destiny, not a goral of fate, but of yi'ud, of destiny. Looking forward, we now have the possibility, if we hear this knock of God on our door, if we truly hear it and we're truly awake, then Soloveitchik argues that the state of Israel gives us an opportunity. The creation of a sovereign Jewish state gives us the opportunity to create our own destiny. We can create it together. We have the possibility of determining what our nation state, what our community, what our culture, what language we will speak, what holidays will be the primary cultural holidays of that country. We will have the opportunity to do that. And so we will be able to determine our destiny. And in fact, I'm working with a project now called Our Common Destiny, which is a project funded by the Genesis Philanthropy Group in partnership with the ministry, Israel's Ministry of the Diaspora, and under the auspices of the President of Israel, Ruvi Rivlin. And the idea is to actually ask the Jewish people, to crowdsource the Jewish people about what principles should be primary when we think about our common destiny. We're awake. We have a sovereign state of Israel. We have strong diaspora communities. We're in fact a bicentric people. We have the community in the strong community in North America and a strong community in Israel. And the question is, what are we going to make of our destiny? What are our primary principles? So you see this verse from the Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 2, Kol Dodi Dofek, the voice of my beloved is knocking, through Soloveitchik in 1956, saying it's an opportunity for a new covenant if we hear that knock, to the year 2020, today, we hear all of the possibilities of how we can understand this verse of God calling to us, of our beloved calling to us, and whether or not we're awake enough to hear that knock. And so if we look through this, the rest of the chapter, we get to verse 6 where she opens the door, but my beloved had turned, right? Right? Patachti ani lidodi vidodi chamak. Avar. He's gone. It was too late. I missed that particular moment when he was just on the other side of the door. And I thought, I yearned to greet, and I thought that I would be able to see him, but he was gone. And it even says, nafshi yatzah. My soul has gone out of me, or I'm faint, because I could hear him. I sought him, right? But I didn't find him. I called, and this is what we hear the Israelites saying throughout slavery in Egypt. I called, karativ velo anani. I called, and God did not answer me. So there's this deep theological sense in which the yearning and the calling out, whether to our beloved or to God, to others who we may need, sometimes there's no answer. And sometimes they seem like they're there, And sometimes we know they have gone away. We know that God has also hidden God's face at times from the Jewish people throughout history. And so the desire for the beloved actually increases through this chapter. And we're going to move forward for lack of time. In chapter 6, we know that there's a sense that that personal fulfillment is turning into a constant critique, because I know that I belong. I've been looking for him and I'm searching for him. And even if there are those who want to help me, I cannot find my beloved. And a continuing sense of the sensuality of this book. I'm going to jump forward to the last chapter so that we can move toward the conclusion of our session. It seems that there are times when there is a fulfillment or a consummation of the relationship. Certainly we have that, the relationship seems consummated in chapter 4, and then it reaches this climax again in chapter 7, which perhaps you can read on your own. I highly recommend it. But already in chapter 8, all of this complex drama increases and leads us to a place of desire about the future. And again, we have this repeated phrase of where I will find you, how I want to drink wine with you. When I meet you, I will be able to kiss you. I'll be able to kiss you fully and have a full expression of our love in public, and no one will despise us. So we have toward the end of the book, if we think about our yearning, that was our fourth yearning, our yearning for a sense of completeness and wholeness and not being have so much self-doubt. We see that her self-doubt is now evaporating. There's the sense that wholeness will also bring a wholeness of spirit. And in verse 3, again, we have the repetition of smolo tachat roshi v'yamino tichabkeni, that his hand is embracing me and I'm fully accepted. And yet, is this time? Is it time? Is it time now? And of course, we have in verse 6 a phrase that's often part of wedding ceremonies, simeni kechotam alibecha, right? That it should be a seal upon your heart. There is something that is so permanent. It is like a seal on your heart. And the final verse that we'll read today, final 2 verses, is we know that even death, even death can be overtaken with love. Love is as fierce as death, that love transcends death. Maim rabim lo yuchlu lechabot et ahava. Not even vast floods can drown this love. No river, no flood, no wealth, nothing can quench or drown this love or these yearnings. So I bless all of us that we should have these glimpses and the hope and the desire that will lead us through this quarantine, this crisis, this pandemic, that will keep all of these yearnings, the yearning for the loved ones that may be far away, the great loves we have not yet found, our yearning for God, our yearning for community, our yearning for a wholeness of self, and our yearning for those who we have lost. May we find a sense of hope and a sense of fullness and a sense of eternal love, even in these days. God bless.